All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with a good friend of mine from way back, Mr. Kipp Pietrantonio. Kipp, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you sitting down to chat with me from way down in Texas. So we'll just jump right into things here. So as I mentioned, you and I go way back. So you're born and raised here in Iron Mountain, right?
Sure was. I was born right in Dickinson County Hospital, 1985.
Yeah, and you and I are the same age, so we ran in very similar circles.
Yeah.
When you think of growing up here in Iron Mountain, what are some like big memories or favorite stories that you have?
Well, let me ask you that. Like, growing up in the UP is a weird place. I mean, isn't it? It's a strange thing to do. It's like nobody else has that experience, and in a way, it's growing up in a super rural area. And so, now first, I'd like to say I know most of the people listening to this are probably huge Uper fans, and I don't want to come off as like a self-hating Uper. So that's not my goal here. But so I'm going to say some hard stuff about the UP, and then I'm going to swing around and talk about how I think it helped a lot. So a lot of my memories had to do with kind of boredom, and not because it was like I didn't live an exciting life or anything. It's that there's just not a lot to do. So you end up doing a lot of the same things over and over and over again in the UP. So it's like I must have ate 5,000 meals at Taco Bell in Iron Mountain as a high schooler because it was the only thing open, after 10 o'clock at night. And so it was something to do. And I mean, it would be to the point where I think we were all so desperate, you drive by Taco Bell just to see if people were there.
Right.
And so, a lot of my high school memories are like sitting in Taco Bell, taking Taco Bell up to the Iron Mountain Pine Mountain ski jump, and like climbing up the ski jump and eating food up there and talking with people. I have a lot of good memories. One of your former guests, Kyle Bloomquist, I have a lot of good memories with him. Him and Brian Taff riding bikes. We would go through literally a routine on our bicycles where we would go to basketball camp in the morning, leave basketball camp, ride to like Hardee's, get a $1 cheeseburger, and then ride and like hit the exact same spots every single. We were like an obsessive compulsive person. It'd be like, okay, we're gonna go to On Cue, which then
I forgot about On Cue.
And like it'd be like we'd look at the same albums, look at the same stickers, and then be like, hey, one day I'm gonna buy this, and it'd be like a big event. I remember we'd go to Family Video and we'd rent like the same video games. Like we must have rented WWE No Mercy for Nintendo 64. I don't know, 500 times. And we probably paid more out of rental fees for that video game than it actually cost to purchase it straight out. So a lot of the memories with that. One thing I remember that was really fun is the East Kingsford Bridge, the EK Bridge.
Yes.
So this, of course, became like a very notorious place in the Upper Peninsula later on because there was a shooting out there. But
yeah,
a number of years ago. But when I was a kid, you'd go out there and there was two big bridges to jump off in our area. One was Badwater Bridge, right? Yeah. And then there was the much more, like many things, Kingsford had a little bit bigger and a little bit better version. So Kingsford had the bigger bridge that you could jump off, and it had several tiers you could select from. And I remember being out there, and every once in a while, and Scott, I don't know if did you ever jump off that bridge?
I did. Not all the way from the very top, but I climbed out on the beams pretty high and jumped from there. But I never had enough gumption to go all the way from the very top of the train trestle.
Was there like legendary stories of people doing backflips and stuff off of it?
Yeah, I remember the time I was out there was an older kid who was like smoking cigarettes and stuff, who you thought was like super cool at the time. Yeah. But now you look back and was probably like a shady character. But yeah, I remember he was like doing flips and stuff, and he was wearing shoes because when you jump from high enough, like you want to have shoes on or you hurt your feet. So I remember seeing people kind of doing dives and flips off of certain parts.
That's so great. Yeah, because I remember there was this like legendary older kid who so there was like David Furno, who was in our class, and then he had two brothers, and his oldest brother, who like no one ever actually met because he was so much older, but we like knew he was in the ethos somewhere. There was all these like legendary stories that he was like a pro snowboarder and everything. be like, oh yeah, he did a triple backflip off the top of EK Bridge. You know, it's like, you know, these things you just tell each other constantly.
Yeah.
There's like probably no validity to it at all. But
You,
anyway.
you brought up a really good point when you were kind of describing what you remember of the repetitive nature or rituals, I guess you could say, of your childhood, because I feel like a lot of what I remember is the same, and maybe it's from a lack of other things to do, but there was very much ritual, like you would always do this on this day or go here or see these people, and I don't know if that's unique to the UP, but it's definitely something that I relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, I think it comes from I think it in a way, I think it's what makes people conservative there, you know, because it's, and I don't mean politically conservative, I just mean the way people think, is that you've done the same thing every year in the same way, and you've eaten at the same places, and like there is this like discomfort for change that I think can naturally come about from that. And in a lot of ways, I think that's really good, is it keeps like traditions alive and keeps place, you know, it's amazing that I can still go eat at the A&W on the north side.
Yes.
You know, and it's been going since before I was born, and it'll be probably going after I'm gone too,
right.
You know, which is wonderful. And at the same time, I think it creates some challenges growing up there as well. But one more thing on the EK Bridge is the big story I wanted to tell or whatever, is I remember every once in a while a train would come across that bridge.
Yes.
Right? And so, you know, it'd be kind of cool because you're like standing there, like looking up at a train. It was very, what was that movie, like Stand By Me? Similar kind of thing happens, right? Where you're looking up and you see the train and everything. And I remember, you know, I don't know if you guys ever did this out in Kingsford, but we would jump on the trains and like hang on and ride them like alongside. So they would have ladders on the side of the trains.
Yeah.
You know, one of the daring things you would do as like a little boy was, or as a little, you know, scrap or whatever, would be to like run and jump and hang on for a little bit and ride the train for a little while.
I can't say I ever did that, so props to you.
So yeah, so maybe there's little kids at Iron Mountain talking about the legends of, you know, Iron Mountain kids doing that back in the day, but we would do that. Well, and sometimes you could, you know, you'd hang on for like 30 seconds and then jump off, and you know, it was kind of fun or whatever. But one day when we were up at that EK Bridge, I remember that I jumped on a ladder, and it just so happened that this ladder actually climbed and went on top of the train, which usually they just went straight up and you couldn't do anything. You just but actually went on top of the train. So I climbed and I actually went on top of the train, and I literally Indiana Jones style, like ran and jumped from car to car on a moving train on the EK Bridge. So that's always like, whenever people, you know, you go to a meeting and they're like, tell us a fact that no one would know about you, I always say like, yeah, I ran on top of a train, Indiana Jones style. You know? So that was probably like my favorite memory from the UP. But anyway, yeah, it was a good place to grow up. But I think, you know, by the time I was, you know, 18, 19 years old, I was like, I want to leave.
Yeah, and I felt very much the same. And you and I ended up both going to school downstate. I was at Central. Yeah. You ended up heading to Grand Valley. Besides just wanting to kind of get out of the UP, I guess, what kind of led you towards Grand Valley?
Well, so part of it is like, so I don't know how much you know about like my family or anything, Scott, but you know, like I was pretty low income growing up. I was not like a wealthy kid or anything. I hung out with a lot of wealthy kids, but I definitely was not wealthy myself. So, you know, my dad was disabled and my mom's a substitute teacher. So, you know, my college literacy was pretty low. It was literally like I picked my college because I heard Grand Rapids was like a cool city.
Sure.
And that was about it. It wasn't like I was like, oh, Grand Valley, I'm gonna, you know, it was kind of like, I remember going on the Grand Valley webpage and being like, after I had already gotten in, and being like, okay, now what should I major in? You know, which now, having worked at many prestigious colleges and stuff, it makes me like cringe. It's like, where was my high school counselor who's supposed to be guiding me, you know, in this process? But, you know, so it was really random, but yeah, I definitely wanted to get out of the UP and I wanted to get to a more cultured place, which, you know, I think it served its purpose, definitely. So
yeah, absolutely. So I guess then I know you studied psychology and sociology. What kind of drew you towards that field of study? Was that something that was random, or did you kind of have like something that drew you to it?
Well, here's where, and this is where I'll connect the deprivation piece that I was talking about from being in the UP, is I think you get really good, and Scott, you're exceptional at this as well, is you get really good at talking to people, because that's naturally what you have to do. And at Iron Mountain, we didn't have a psychology class. I think we had a sociology class, but it was actually geography. It wasn't so, it wasn't studying like Karl Marx or anything like that, and it's also, I always think it's weird that in high school, when you think of like social studies, what do you think of?
Mostly like geography, like looking at maps and that type of stuff.
or like it's like history.
Yeah,
right?
or history. Yeah, history for sure.
Weird, because neither of those things are, they're not really social studies when you think about, like, when you think about a social science, it's like anthropology, psychology, sociology, which we really didn't have. And so, I actually was a pretty average student. I guess I was a little above average. I was good enough where I was making the honors club or whatever it was, but like,
Sure.
I was definitely not the smartest kid in my class at all, or even in the top, 20% or anything like that. So, and the reason for that was because I was never that great at math or science. In the traditional, like, especially math, that was not my forte. So it's like, if you're forced to take a math class and it's pretty much a guaranteed B for you,
Yeah.
You're just not going to be one of those top kids. So, I think that affected me. And maybe the same thing happened to you, Scott, but like, I never felt like I was especially smart or anything. Like, I was kind of like, oh man, if I can get through college, that would be amazing. So, it affected what we call, like, I guess we call in psychology, my self-efficacy, which is my belief of what I could do,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, was that your experience at all, or were you kind of a genius from the out front?
I don't consider myself a genius or anything even close to it. I've always felt relatively smart. School was never, I never felt super challenged. I mean, there were some courses that I took that were like really tough. But I was kind of in the same boat as you. I was never particularly strong in like math and science type stuff. That was the type of stuff that I really kind of had to work at. But other stuff, I don't know if it just kind of came naturally to me. It never really felt necessarily all that hard. But I guess I was always just kind of fine with being like an, A, B kind of average student. I probably didn't apply myself as much as I really could have, especially in college. I mean, by the time I got to college, it was like, okay, if I can still party like four or 5 days a week, like still go out, and if I can keep A's and B's, like, great,
Yeah. So I think that, just going back to your question, I think that when I got to Grand Valley, I didn't know I was originally going to be a journalism major, and that's what I started off as is. And, I think I had this cool idea in my head that I was going to be like this investigative journalist who came in, like, went into business, or worked at the news or something like that. And then when I realized, like, journalism is literally like going places and writing down what you see, that wasn't as interesting to me. Sure. And so I took a psychology class, which I had never taken at that point, and it just clicked immediately for me. And I started being like, wow, I'm like doing really well. I'm doing better than my classmates. And I can tell that, like, this makes sense to me. And the reason I think it made sense to me is because when you grow up and your main activity is talking and interacting and reading people, and that's like all you do all day, like my little visits to Taco Bell, it was really just about talking with people. So you kind of build some, I don't even want to say streetwiseness, but like some kind of, maybe we can call it dirt roadness. You start building some intelligence. And you probably noticed this, guy, like when you were down at college, if you met another Youper, it was like immediately you could kind of like talk and click with them.
Yeah.
And it was more than just like, oh, we both, have a connection. It was like, we naturally know to be friendly and interact, and like we can build a relationship very quickly. Mm-hmm. And I think that ended up lending itself exceptionally well to counseling later on, which I didn't anticipate, obviously. I know a lot of my story here has been like falling into things and having them work out. So
Well, and that's okay. I mean, I don't know how many episodes of the podcast you've listened to, but a lot of people that have shared their story with me, it's been a lot less planning and more so, like you said, kind of like falling into certain places and opportunities, kind of following that theme, I guess. So when you graduated in 2008, you ended up heading to the University of North Dakota, right?
Yeah. And so the reason I went there was not because I had this passion for North Dakota and I just had to be there. It's a hot place to be. But it was because what I really wanted to study was some kind of place where they integrated psychology and sociology. And I started looking at schools, and because of where I grew up, I had this innate interest in poverty, and specifically rural poverty, and growing up in rural Michigan, where what I always say to people when I describe growing up in Michigan, and when it comes to my research, which I studied poverty mainly and economic inequality, is like, if a factory goes down in Detroit, there's still 50 more factories. If a factory goes down in Iron Mountain, Michigan, like literally a third of the town may go away.
Absolutely. And that's
Right.
something that I don't think a lot of people really talk about. I mean, it's easy to kind of look at the UP with rose-colored glasses and talk about what a quaint, ideal like place it is to grow up. But there's definitely that, like you just said, that economic poverty. If people losing jobs, unemployment, it's an absolute reality to the way of life up here.
Yeah, I had this very bizarre event. I was attending this rural psychology conference in Anchorage, Alaska, right?
Okay.
And so I'm up there, and I'm like, sitting, you go, if you've ever been to a conference before, you go to like symposium after symposium, and I walk into this symposium, and it says rural research on economic development in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Wow.
Wow, I'm like gonna go to this for sure. And I walk in, and guess where he's studying? He's studying Iron Mountain, Michigan, of all places, and he's specifically studying the Quinnipiac Mill.
Wow.
And the effects of the Niagara Mill.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Niagara, Wisconsin is right on the border of Iron Mountain, Michigan.
Yep.
Niagara Mill closed down in like 2004 or 2005 or something like that?
It was because I spent summers working at the Niagara paper mill.
Really?
If you had a family member that worked at the mill, college kids, they like drew names out of a hat, but they would take X amount of college kids every year and you could work there. So I worked there from the summer of 2005 to, I want to say we shut it down in 2008.
Wow, really? What was it like working there?
It was an awesome experience from the standpoint of learning like work ethic and taking me out of my comfort zone, because I was never like, growing up, I was never like a super, like, I didn't take building trades. I didn't learn how to like build a lot of stuff with my hands or be real like crafty in that sense.
Yeah.
So it was really good at kind of teaching me work ethic and kind of learning just a lot of stuff that I would have never really ever kind of come across. It was definitely hard work.
Yeah, I imagine. So what was your actual, like, what were you doing? What was your actual job there?
So I was on the paper winder. So basically after it runs through and they put it on really big spools, then the orders that we have is you have to like run it through a machine that cuts it and puts it on a smaller spool. And when I say smaller, it might be the cardboard spool might be like, let's just say 3 feet wide, but the spool that you cut, it might be, or the paper, once it winds up on there, might be, 3 feet tall. So it's a big reel of paper. So my job was basically, you have to tail the paper through the machine, put it onto this spool or tape it to this cardboard spool, and then the machine winds it up. And and then when it comes off of there, you've got to cut it off, tape it down, stencil the side of it, roll it onto a conveyor belt, and then a conveyor takes it to where they package it up. And
so you were doing like literal assembly line labor.
Yeah. And
you've earned your Detroit hat.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was, I was right on the crew. I was basically there so that somebody could be on vacation. So it was, like 12-hour shifts, and we would work 3 days on, 3 days off, and you'd switch between days and midnights.
Wow,
So,
12-hour shifts, doing that all day?
yeah. So, like I said,
God.
it was intense. I probably missed out on a lot of like fun stuff going on in the summers, but at the same time, I was making what the person that was working that spot normally would make. So I made enough money working really hard through the summers that I didn't have to have a job like during the college year while I was at school. I would make
That's
enough that I could,
incredible.
yeah. So it was very interesting. But it was very hardworking, and I worked with some really, really great guys. But every single one of them all summer long would be like, get your degree, don't rely on this place. I know the money is super tempting,
Yeah.
and not to say that a 4-year degree is everything. I mean, there's a lot of great jobs out there that, don't involve getting a college degree, but they just basically were trying to get across to me, don't let the money lure you into working here, because I mean, we were with each other more than you'd see your own family. I mean, really, when you do the hours, you're with those people more than family and friends. So it taught me a lot, but it also gave me the drive to want to really do something else with my life besides just working in a paper mill.
Whoa. So whoa. Thank you for telling me that story. That's awesome. I mean, that's an incredible thing. That's like the kind of thing, you write a little like memoir about or something. That's
Yeah.
So anyway, so I'm up in Alaska, right? And I'm like listening to this guy talk about, and he's literally talking about the effects on the city of Niagara and Iron Mountain from the Niagara paper mill closing. And it showed like he interviewed people like over a number of years as as it sold to different people, and you can see their hopes in the interviews like die. And like they're like, no, somebody else is going to buy it and it's going to be okay. And then later it's like, no, it's not. And then it slowly gets to like, I'm leaving.
Sure.
Unity. So, seeing things like that happen, or, over by my house in the north side of Iron Mountain, like the Corey furniture factory going under, or, seeing things like that was interesting to me that, that nobody feels like they're really focusing on this. So anyway, I wanted to go out to North Dakota because they have this focus on psychology and specifically applied to rural poverty. And that was really interesting. So I ended up going out there and interviewing. Literally the first time I had ever been on an airplane was my flight for my grad school interview to Grand Forks, North Dakota.
Wow.
Yeah, if you can believe that. So went out there, interviewed, thought the interview went terrible, thought there was like zero chance that I would get in or anything. And, PhD programs are nuts. Scott, I don't know if you know this, but like they'll interview 100 people and they'll take 5.
Wow, I did not know that.
It's craziness, and it's even worse nowadays. I think my the PhD program I'm teaching right now, this year they had 210 applicants for 10 spots.
Wow.
I mean, it's just crazy. And you end up getting the top 4 or 5% of who end up accepting. But anyway, so I go out there and I interview, and I didn't feel like it went especially well, and I was able to talk about my stuff. But the woman, Dr. Cindy Jutman, who later on ended up being my advisor, I could tell she and I connected. And I knew that I was like, if I got a chance, it's going to be through that. And sure enough, like, 2-3 weeks later, all of a sudden I get an email and it says, hey, Kipp, right now we've deemed you an alternate, but with a giant capitalized bolded but, and it says, but there is a strong possibility we will be making you an offer. And literally the next day, they made me an offer. And what happens when that happens is, they accept the first 5 or 6 people or whatever, and then usually the top 1 or 2 people get multiple offers. So they hold an offer and then they let it go. So I ended up getting in the next day, and all of a sudden, and this is again how low my literacy was. I also had got into Marquette University in Milwaukee, but for a master's degree.
Okay.
Right. And this is how, I just didn't know what I was doing. I was like, which one should I do? like, like the doctorate or Marquette. And, it's like you start asking people and people are like, well, Marquette's a pretty, especially people in the UP, because they
Yeah.
know Marquette. So they're like, Marquette's a really good school. Like,
Yeah.
so I'm really thinking, like, should I let go of this golden ticket, of getting a PhD? And luckily I had an advisor, my sociology advisor looked at me and he was like, are you an idiot? Like, go get your PhD. Like, why would you ever let that go? And I was like, okay, I guess I'm an idiot. So I end up moving up to North Dakota. First, I literally, the first time I was there, other than the interview, was driving my Pontiac Bonneville, from Grand Rapids, Michigan, up through the UP and 9 hours down US 2. And I swear to God, in North Dakota, I lived on US 2.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't know if people know this. US 2, runs through the UP.
Yeah, I know it runs, but yeah.
So I literally, like, my like little dorm room that I lived in the first year was on US 2. So I never got off the road.
So a PhD program, and if I'm being naive, I apologize, because obviously I've never gone for a PhD or anything like that.
Yeah.
Is this like strictly where you're just like working on a thesis, or do you have like a dissertation, or I guess what goes into?
So there's two ways you can enter into a PhD program. There's either post undergrad PhD or post masters.
Okay.
So most people who do it tend to have their master's first, and then they go get the PhD. But because I was going straight from undergrad, you have to take all the master's level classes first, because they basically want to get you up to the master's degree folks. So you end up doing it in kind of an expedited fashion. So my school had a master's program in counseling, and a PhD program, all in the same department. So they basically put me through the master's program in counseling. And so I ended up getting a master's degree in community counseling. And with that, you're doing a little bit I was like a TA, because I was still a PhD student. So I was like teaching a little bit, and I was doing research with my advisor on rural poverty, which was really great. And I ended up doing, like, we didn't call it a thesis in my department. We called it an independent study. And it was right during the height of the recession. And so what I actually did was I ended up comparing stress levels and support levels in Michigan versus North Dakota. And the reason I did those two states was because Michigan was one of the worst states hit during the recession, if not the worst state. And North Dakota had an oil boom.
That's right.
So North Dakota was actually growing during the recession, which was insanity. We have like, our unemployment rate was lower than it had ever been. And so there was this dichotomy kind of going on between the two states. So it presented this really beautiful opportunity to examine, like, one state that's like on the rise and the other state's and they're both very rural.
Right.
So I was able to examine the people in each one. And actually what I ended up finding was there was no difference between the two states, which is shocking when you think about it. But where the difference was between the cities and the rural areas.
Sure.
The people in the rural areas felt dramatically more stressed out compared to the people in, like, so, Detroit versus Baraga, Michigan. I don't know, Baraga, Michigan had almost a 40% unemployment rate during the recession. So, it was very intense. And then in Detroit, they're freaking out because they're at 10%.
Right.
While Baraga's 4 times what they're experiencing. So yeah, so I ended up going up there. You end up taking a bunch of classes, and then there were like doctoral classes, because there's things you have to learn how to do research, which the master's folks didn't learn. Meanwhile, though, from your second year on, you're actually learning to do counseling too, like one-on-one. And so even though I'm doing this research that isn't really around counseling, I'm still counseling people. And so what you're doing is they start off and they put you with a partner who's just another student in your class, and you pretend to do counseling. And then somebody's watching you through a two-way mirror, and they give you feedback. And then they let you see the real people, and they start you off with like clients who pay like $1 to come talk to you. And it's like a free clinic, basically. They have to pay $1 because they know there's all this research that shows people take counseling more seriously even if they pay $1.
Sure.
Versus they don't pay anything. So they pay $1. And then what they do is what they call bug in the ear supervision, which is you're sitting with the patient, but there's a licensed psychologist watching you from another room, and you have basically a Bluetooth headset on. And so they're whispering stuff in your ear. So they're basically, and it's not constant. It's maybe like 3 or 4 times a session, but they're just making sure you don't do anything hurtful or do anything that could be damaging to the person. And they're giving you little pieces of advice. And so you're getting like this very dedicated, therapy experience where you're trying to work on your little summary statements and the things you're supposed to say to people. And then after that, you end up seeing real clients, and that's where you go off and do what we call a practicum, which is you're working in some place in the community. So the first year, I worked at this place called the Village Family Services, and they would go do in-home family therapy with rural North Dakota households.
Okay.
So here's what I got. Here's a fun story for you. So I'm going out to, I drive 2 hours out, and I'll leave most confidential information out of this, obviously, but I'm going out to this super rural area in North Dakota. It takes 2 hours to get there, Scott, right? And this is just, people in North Dakota are like, they're a lot like Yoopers, but they're like, they don't have that Italian spice to them. So, where a Yooper accent is like, oh, hey, Scooter, how you doing, buddy? Versus like a North Dakota accent is more like, hey, Scooter, how are you? So it's kind of like, it's like a deadpan version of the UP, So I get out there and I'm with my little co-counselor who's like training me. And he's just like, oh yeah, we're heading out there. We're just talking, shooting the shit or whatever. And we get out to this house. And all of a sudden I look out the door and they're like, he turns to me, he goes, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, they have a pet wolf.
A wolf?
What? He goes, yeah, I forgot to tell you. And I'm like, you forgot to tell me they have a pet wolf and we're going into their house? And so anyway, I'm like, why do they have a pet wolf? He goes, meth addicts have been stealing their chemicals from their barn, and the meth addicts poisoned their last dog.
Oh my God.
With antifreeze in the dog's water bowl, so that they could get into the barn and steal the chemicals. So anyway, we end up going in there, and sure enough, there's like this. It's 2/3 or whatever, 75% wolf, and then like the other part is husky. And I'm talking like, this looks like a wolf. It doesn't look like a dog at all. And I'm supposed to be counseling this child, like this kid, while my co-counselor is talking to the parents. And literally, there's a wolf sniffing my like crotch. And I'm like, do I pet it? Like, what do I, what I mean? And this thing is literally here to keep like meth addicts out of the city, or out of their neighborhood, So
Wow.
That was probably one of the weirdest experiences. But anyway, so yeah, so you're learning to counsel people, and I ended up working there. I ended up working at the University of North Dakota Counseling Center. I ended up going out to this hospital where I got trained in like integrated healthcare, so working with doctors and everything. So you're like tag teaming, for people's treatment.
Sure.
Everything. I had some really great experiences.
So how then does that transition from like being in North Dakota to doing like your postdoctorate like fellowship at U of M? How does that transition take place?
So before you go off to, at the end of your PhD in psychology, you basically, those who are familiar with like the medical school process, you get matched somewhere. And so what you do is you interview a bunch of places, you rank them, and then they rank you. And then this giant algorithm runs and they match you out, right?
Okay.
So I ended up matching at the University of California, Santa Cruz, which, to me proved the world was fair, because if you had to live in North Dakota for 5 years, you should definitely get to move to Santa Cruz, California as a reward.
Yeah.
Afterwards. So I got to move to Santa Cruz, which is like you couldn't imagine a place that's more opposite of North Dakota. It's like a beach town with it's like the skateboarding capital of the world. Like they have monuments to surfers.
Okay.
Like, it's this total hippie, 3rd generation hippies growing up there. You see 50-year-old men wearing Santa Cruz skateboarding t-shirts, skateboarding to work in the morning. It's just this totally different culture. And so I ended up going out there, and I worked at the counseling center, which, this started a theme in my work, you know. So I got matched at the counseling center, and then my supervisor out in Santa Cruz had actually worked at the University of Michigan before she had worked in Santa Cruz. So she had really encouraged me. She's like, "Oh, Kipp, you know, if you're from Michigan, you should apply at U of M." And I was like, "Don't they only take fancy people?" You know? And she was like, "Kipp, you are a fancy person." I was like, "No, you know, like they're not." So anyway, I ended up applying, and luckily, I ended up getting on the interview with this guy who's actually one of my close friends to this day, named Ryan McDermott, who was he was a current postdoc out there, and he was really interested in the study of like masculinity and men's issues, which was also something that I was clinically interested in. I'd worked with a lot of guys, going back again to the UP, by spending a lot of time just hanging out with guys, talking, you know. So you know, you get good at it, right? So that was something I was pretty interested in, and him and I connected on the interview right away. And sure enough, I ended up getting the postdoc over at University of Michigan's Counseling Center. So then I was, you know, I had just met my fiance, who I had met out in who later ended up being my fiance out in California, and we were. I was in Washington D.C. because I was doing some advocacy work for the American Psychological Association. And I had talked to, I had been offered the University of Michigan postdoc on my way to Washington, D.C. And they, you know, with postdocs, they give you 3 days to decide. So they're like, are you going to move to Ann Arbor? And I'm like, I don't know. So I ended up calling my girlfriend at the time and saying, "Hey, do you want to move to Ann Arbor with me? We've been dating for 6 months. I think in 6 months more, you'll like me enough to move." And we ended up talking about it on the phone for about an hour or two. And she was like, "Yeah, I want to go." So then right there, I called University of Michigan, accepted the postdoc, and went out there. And you ever heard of that movie? Like, it's like the 5-year engagement or something like that.
It's not ringing any bells, so you'll have to enlighten me.
Anyway, it's weird because it's like the exact same story. It's
okay.
like person moves to the University of Michigan and like their girlfriend is like in California to do a postdoc in psychology. Really strange, but yeah. So we went the opposite route, but yeah. So I got to go back to Michigan and, you know, reconnect with everybody, and it was really lovely.
So what goes into like this postdoc? I mean, what when you get to that point, what is it that you're really doing while you're there?
So the main purpose of a postdoc in psychology is actually to get licensed.
Okay.
Because like many, you know, professions where you have to get a state license to do the profession, you have to have a certain amount of hours after you finish your degree. So in Michigan, you have to have 2,000 hours, which is basically a year of clinical work. So you go do the postdoc, and then you take this giant exam at the end of it, which is called the EPPP, which is you have to spend like 200 hours studying for the exam. So, you know,
wow,
out there in, you know, my little office in the University of Michigan, what do you call I can't even remember the name of the building now. The not the alumni house. The what's the central hub on campus called? Peter, I always forget, where all the kids hang out.
At the UC or the student center, the university center.
Right. That's exactly right, the Michigan Union. So I sat in my little office in the Michigan Union and studied for this multiple choice exam for 1 million hours. But, you know, I was counseling students, you know, from the University of Michigan, and that was something that was really strange for me, those guys, because I was all excited because I had never counseled people from Michigan before, you know, and I was all excited to do it. Well, I would say maybe about 1 out of 6 of the people I actually counseled were actually from Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And so what people don't realize is that University of Michigan is like this global institution that people from all over the world go to. And to expect that, you know, everyone's going to be from Lansing or Mount Pleasant or Gaylord or, you know, is totally unrealistic. And, you know, I only even met one other Uper the entire time I worked there. Wow. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, when I found them, you know, it's like, who are you, you know? So it was, you know, you're doing a lot of counseling, you're getting your licensure stuff together, you're getting some supervision, you're getting some training that you're basically learning to teach more in terms of the clinical setting. So we call it supervision. You're providing supervision. So you're getting a lot of training on that as well. And so, yeah, so at the end there, then I started looking for kind of my, at age like almost 30, my first real job.
Yeah. And okay, so you're looking for your first real job, and then you jump the border and
Yeah,
head to the arch rival, right?
I sure did. So I ended up taking a job at the, I'm going to say Ohio State University, because if I say the
The
Ohio State, everyone's
the
going to
Ohio State University.
So, what's funny about the Ohio State thing though, the students, like even the students at Ohio State, like hate that. Like they think
Really?
it, yeah, they think it's like a joke. Like there's kind of like a joke that how do you know if you're a freshman? And it's like if you say the Ohio State, and there's a bunch of stuff like that. So yeah, no, even everybody hates. There's like nobody who really likes that. Just they sell like the T-shirts and stuff, but they're not very popular compared to like other stuff. But so here's what people don't understand about that transition, because this is just a total insider baseball higher education thing. That what makes you attractive to a place like Ohio State or Michigan is if you've worked in a different Big Ten school. And
Okay.
even though you're like a rival or whatever, they don't think of it like, I mean, in football they think of that, but they think like how to work in a Big Ten school, because they're all basically the same, just different colors.
Right.
Like they all copy each other. So I'll give you an example. Like Michigan, the year I was there, they had a donor give $300 million for a law school. Well, Ohio State the next year got $350 million for a new law school. So it's just, and then it's like if they did it, then all of a sudden Penn State has to get a new law
Sure.
school. It just kind of goes and goes. So they want people who have that experience. They know what the types of students who go to Big Ten schools are like. They know what the needs of the school are. They know how to work like that, like massive level where you have 40, 50,000 students. So, I was really actually you become a very good candidate when you do that. And so even the year that I went there, I went down to Ohio State and 2 of their postdocs came up to Michigan.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually pretty common. But I'll tell you this, you don't get any love from your hometown friends. So at all, and it's funny because every student I met, I had to cross that bridge with, because they would be like, oh, where are you from? And I'd be like, Michigan, And I have my little University of Michigan like postdoc certificate on the wall and stuff. So,
Sure.
And Ohio State people definitely hate Michigan people way more than Michigan people hate Ohio State people. Like their whole year revolves around that game.
I'm sure. So I know you ended up being at Ohio State for almost 4 years. Were you just primarily then like working with students?
Yeah. So I was counseling students, but first of all, I loved my time at Ohio State. Like it was probably some of the best years of my life. Columbus, Ohio is one of the coolest cities you could ever go to. It's like it's like 1 million people. It's got a big city feel, but it's got small town stuff. It's a college town, so it's got the whole college town center, but then it's like a very culturally diverse place as well. So I loved living there. I loved going to like Columbus Crew soccer games, and it was like it was a lot of fun to be there. I loved my job too, because they gave me just an absolutely crazy amount of freedom to kind of pursue whatever I wanted. So they were letting me do my research, and they were letting me like I was running men's groups, which I really loved and always wanted to do. So I was basically hanging out with college guys like all the time, which was fun. I would go down to like fraternity basements and give like lectures. I remember literally kicking aside beer cans, to clear a space for me to lecture. It was, you're like going, I mean, you got to think about it, like going into like, you're trying to sell mental health in a fraternity house basement.
Yeah.
You're in the heart of it, if you're interested in doing men's stuff there. So I really loved it. I made a lot of really great connections with the fraternities and the sororities even, and, and some of the groups on campus. And we ended up developing, you ever heard of like the Movember campaign?
Yes. Yeah. I've participated.
Great. So one thing that we ended up doing is we couldn't raise money because we're a public institution for it.
Sure.
But we ended up developing our own Movember campaign around raising mental health awareness on campus. And it ended up growing to be the biggest Movember campaign on a college campus in the country.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and I was like kind of doing that and leading that, and that was a ton of fun. And we got to, my boss, like the first year he gave me like $1,000 for it to like put on, get t-shirts made and everything. And by the last year I was getting like $5,000-$6,000
Wow.
of money to be able to like spend on stuff. And we were bringing in speakers, and it was getting really big, and we were getting national press coverage for it, and it was a lot of fun to do. And so I just loved it. But at the end of the day, my fiance was a California girl, living in Columbus, Ohio. She's, Mexican American. So she was, didn't have a lot of her cultural pieces that she wanted around her. It was harder for her to like get the food that she liked. It was harder for her to like, speak Spanish with people, which was something she would really liked and thought was important. Her students, she like taught in a Latino school, but it was like a very low income Latino school. So it was a hard place to work. And so she was, we started being like, okay, eventually I need to make more money, because when you work at Ohio State, or any state institution, your raises get dictated by the state. And if you have a Republican governor and they're not interested in really giving tons and tons of money to higher ed, so my raises were $1,000 a year, which was just not, if I worked there for 40 years, I'd be making a decent, I was making a good salary, of course, but I, wanted to make a little bit more. And if we were
Right.
start,
Yeah.
Getting married, having kids. So I started looking in for other opportunities and ended up coming down to Texas. And the reason we chose Dallas is because I have a cousin who already lives down here, and it was a lot more like Latino friendly, and a lot more, the teacher salaries in Texas are amazing. So my partner actually makes more money than I did, and she makes more money as a teacher in Texas than I did as a psychologist in Ohio.
Wow.
So it's crazy, So we ended up finding this position. Actually, the position I started with in Texas was not the one I ended up taking eventually. I started with a position down here, ended up not liking it and not feeling it was a good fit, and was just not the antithesis of really what I wanted to do. So I ended up looking around a little bit more, and one of the great things is when you're a licensed psychologist, there's almost always a job for you. And I ended up finding this position at basically this huge medical school in the center of Dallas, in the Department of Psychiatry. And in a lot of ways, it's my dream job, because I counsel people. I get time and money for my research, and I get to teach PhD students, which I never thought I would find something where I could do all of those things at the same time and like get paid a good salary. So it's been awesome. I really love it.
Yeah. Talk about kind of coming full circle, and it goes back to what you were saying way early on in the convo about it wasn't as if you were really like looking for this and trying to get to this point. It just, you kind of just found it.
Well, and because I had worked in college counseling for so long, I felt very trapped. I was like, okay, the only thing I'm ever going to be able to do is counsel 18-year-olds. And by the way, if you ever want a reminder that you're not 18 anymore, go talk to an 18-year-old. Because it becomes very obvious the difference between you and them really quick. And so, I also was kind of feeling my age a little bit, that I was like, well, I've been doing this for like, 7-8 years now. And do I really want to keep talking to 18-year-olds forever, about their major and their classes and their and whether or not people are following them on Instagram, and the people's snap streaks being broken and, all that stuff. So I ended up, thinking that it would be better to work with a bigger population.
Yeah. So with the counseling that you're kind of doing now, I'm assuming it's probably with the world that we're living in currently with quarantine and such. I'm guessing it's probably pretty interesting.
Yeah, it really is. So, because we really rapidly, the whole country had to move to telehealth, right? So we were all, seeing patients in our offices, and everything was going business as usual. And all of a sudden, you can't do that anymore. But you can't just cancel care for everybody. So we have to really rapidly, we had to move to doing counseling how you and I are talking. Like basically, we use a different program, but basically over Zoom, which most of us had never even done before. I had done it in really rare circumstances, like twice. but that was about it. And so it's not like I had this very low competency with it. And we were kind of making up the rules, and we put together a little task force, and luckily we were able to get everybody up and running on it within like 2 weeks, which was, I mean, a Herculean effort to kind of make it happen for the department. But it's been very wild, because not only have I counseled people who are like actually healthcare workers, but I've also counseled people who have COVID-19, and I've also counseled people who are just sitting at home bored.
Sure.
And so I'm getting these, I kind of feel like I'm like a, I don't know, like a mouse in a house or something like that. It's like I'm getting these little peeks into people's lives through the camera.
Sure.
You know, and you kind of see what's going on for them. And it's like, you know, when one person, you'll see them just like, you know, they're in sweatpants and a t-shirt, and they're like, yeah, I've been working all day, and they're like in bed, you know. And then you see the next person, they're coughing, and they have COVID-19. They feel like a leper, because people, you know, have stigmatized. If you have it, you're quarantined, you can't go near, and people are treating you like you're, you know, like a monster of some kind. So it's it's been pretty wild to try to counsel people through all this.
I can't only imagine. I mean, another really cool thing, I mean, this is quite an honor. You recently lectured at Yale Medical School, right?
Yeah. So, you know, and let me say this again, Scott, this is not because I'm like this super prestigious professor that Yale just was beating down the door to get Dr. Kipp in the door, like, please come talk to us. Like, this is another perfect example of a circumstance that I just kind of fell into. And I'll tell you how it happened is we started this EAP line. So for those who don't know, it's like employee assistance, because we have so many healthcare workers like calling for help and because they're stressed out. So we started this EAP line that people could call, and I was on the committee that did that. And so we were getting calls, and, you know, the calls were kind of coming in slowly, because, you know, it's like you're not getting 100 calls a day on it or something like that. And I'm sitting in my office, and I turned to my boss and I said, hey, you know, rather than me just sitting here, how about I put together like a little PowerPoint or something that we can like send out to different departments, because, you know, rather than kind of pulling babies out of the river, let's like get ahead, you know, and
Yeah.
they can like, kind of know the stuff that we're going to teach them in advance. And he goes, oh, I think that's a good idea. So I ended up making the PowerPoint, and I sent it out to our little EAP team. Well, one of the psychiatrists on our EAP team was like, oh, Kipp, this is awesome. And he sends it off to the chair of the department. The chair of the department sees it. She's like, this is amazing, and sends it up to the dean of the medical school.
Wow.
The medical school then sees it, goes, this is amazing, sends it up to the CMO of the hospital, right? And let me give you, this is not an amazing PowerPoint or anything. It's just literally, it's just that I did it quickly.
Sure.
You know, so it's just like, it's very simple. It's like, here's social distancing, here's stressors, here's coping skills. Like, it's just that over and over again, but nobody had produced anything like that yet, you know?
Yeah.
So it ends up going up to the CMO, and then the CMO goes, I'm going to send this to everybody on campus. So it gets sent out to, you know, 5,000-6,000 people in one shot, which was like, that was cool enough. I was like, cool, right? Started getting, because then people started sending it out on their listservs across the country. So, you know, radiologists have connections with all the other radiologists in the country. Starts going out that way. And then we start getting emails from like other universities and the schools being like, oh, this is helpful, this is great. We ended up getting one from the executive leadership team at Southwest Airlines.
Wow.
They were like, oh, this is great, you know, like, thank you, can we use this? You know, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, yeah, sure, that's fine, or whatever. Well, anyway, so finally I get an email from a cardiologist out at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, who's like, hey, I was looking online for, you know, stress management for healthcare workers, and this thing came up, and I thought it was amazing, and, you know, it's really cool. And did you guys develop this? Because our, like, you know, our names are on in our emails. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, I developed it. Do you want us? I mean, we'd be happy to like come present, basically, if you want us to. And he was like, yeah, let's set that up. And within like 3 or 4 days, we set it up, and all of a sudden we were talking to a cardiology department at Yale Medical School about stress management. And let's just say I was extremely stressed out about about doing that.
How's that for ironic?
Oh, I know, right? That is ironic. But, you know, so we end up presenting it there, and then, you know, since then we've gotten a lot of more kind of offers, and we're trying to do a lot of in-house stuff. So we're going to be talking to the nurses for the university here in Texas the next couple of days, and we'll be talking to leadership teams. So I feel like a lot of my job has just become like I'm a professional presenter of this PowerPoint.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, so that kind of happened. It was quite an honor, and not I never would have ever thought in my life that I would even go to Yale. I didn't go there, of course, I did over Zoom, but that I would ever be invited to like lecture there.
Right.
Crazy,
So I just think it's really awesome because with everything that's going on with this quarantine, there are so many different stressors, and mental health during this time is probably more important than it ever is.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, you don't have to give me the whole spiel or rundown of your PowerPoint, but what are some of the tips that you're sharing with people to deal with these stressors?
Sure. So I think the first thing is you have to look at what you've lost in order to figure out how to fix it. So Scott, let me ask you this, like, your life hasn't changed because you work from home a lot, but if you had to guess, what are some of the things that people have lost in this process, what would you say?
Well, they could lose their job. They might lose the ability to see family and friends, that freedom. They might lose their health. They might end up getting sick and being stuck in a hospital bed. And those are just the three big things that I think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are some of the main concerns, of course, and I'll just add a few more, which is, like losing your routine, losing like a sense of freedom.
Sure.
Like you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go any places. Your kids are freaking out. So now you're doing this kind of work, having your kids at home. Your work and home division has dissolved, right? So now it's all blurred together. And so, your connection with friends, your ability to see people, your ability to even have like small moments of intimacy, that you can't shake anybody's hand, you can't hug anybody, all these pieces, even things like being deemed essential versus not being essential it can be a really kind of traumatic, my job's not important, or I'm not lucky enough, so there's a big sense of like victimization, especially for small business owners who are, out there, trying to do their best, and they're being forced to choose, like, do I pay my employees, or do I find a new way to do business, or do I, they're trying to figure it out. So anyway, so getting back to the tips, I guess, the first thing I think is that the absolutely most important thing is recognizing what you've lost and kind of doing an assessment of like, how is this affected? Because most people don't realize how much of behavioral animals human beings are. We really do like doing the same things pretty much every day, and we don't realize how much a disruption to that routine can really mess with our mental health. So the first thing is recognizing what in your routine has changed. So with my job, I'll just say, I'm used to counseling people, but then I have all my colleagues in the office. I can bounce ideas, I can talk, I can consult. Now I can't do that. So now I'm having these kind of emotionally intense conversations in my own home without anybody else to check in with or talk to. Well, what do you think that does to a person? It's more draining.
Sure, absolutely.
Right, especially if you're an extrovert, which you may notice I am, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I have to first see, like, if I don't develop some other forms of social connection, like, I'm going to be worse in my job. And if I'm worse in my job, I know with my type of personality, I'm going to feel bad collectively. So in a weird way, doing the presentations, talking to Yale, talking to you right now, talking to other people has helped me a lot, because it's helping me kind of recharge my battery as an extrovert, right? Because
right.
Counseling, if you can believe I can do this, is just listening. So, but anyway, so that first thing I think is first assessing what you lost. Second part is then like developing a new routine, which has helpful things in it. So one of the big things everyone's lost is access to self-care activities. So Scott, you seem like the kind of guy who goes to the gym once in a while, I imagine, right? So you too, right? We go to the gym, you go outside, you run, you work out, you lift, everything. Well, guess what? You can't do that anymore. So now all the cortisol in everybody's body, if you don't replace that, is just going to skyrocket. And when your cortisol goes up, your stress level goes up, right? So, you have to come up with new creative ways to work out every single day, because if you don't, your stress level is going to go through the roof, right? So new routine, new working out, getting over the hump of like the fear of talking to people digitally is a real thing. I know the natural instinct is to be avoidant of those kinds of things. It's a lot easier to not go to like the little, virtual happy hour that your work is putting on than it is to do it. But we know that when people go and do these kinds of connections, that they tend to feel a lot better afterwards. It's kind of like going to any kind of party. You're like, well, maybe I shouldn't go. It's easier to stay home. I don't want to get dressed up. I'm already in pajamas, But then once you go and you have fun, you're like, oh, I'm so glad I went. Why was I even hesitant about going?
Right.
And what's that same kind of thing with stuff like this that we're doing right now? So that's another huge part. Anyway, I don't know if there's any, like I could talk for another literal hour on that. So,
I find it super interesting, and I'm hoping that as people listen into this, they take some of these tips that you're giving to heart. The other kind of interesting kind of angle on this whole thing, and you just put a little video out about this, was like the social media impact, because the fact that we're all stuck at home, people are glued to their their tablets and their phones and everything way more. Let's discuss kind of your video you put out and your recommendation.
Well, so UT Southwestern, like the school that I work at, University of Texas Southwestern Medical School, like was like, after we had all the success, they were basically like, hey, can you make some YouTube? Like basically they brought their marketing team in and they were like, can we do some videos with you? And I was like, isn't that violating social distancing? How am I going to make a video? And they were like, it's okay. We've got special permission to bring you in and we're going to film you from like 6 feet away. So it's okay. So that was funny in itself, but anyway, so the videos, there's actually 4 more coming.
Oh, okay, cool.
So spoiler alert for those who just can't get enough of me. I know I found it extreme. First of all, I appreciate everybody's support for those who were really nice about my little video that you can find on UT Southwestern's Facebook page. But I also was like so cringy about it. It was like, oh God, my tie's all screwed up and I look weird and but anyway, so there's more coming out about more topics, but the video was about the media and how misinformation. So there's a couple of things going on. One is that people aren't getting information, right? So we don't know what's going on. A lot of the information we're getting is contradictory, where it's like, first you're going to have symptoms, then you can be asymptomatic for 5 days at one point, and then it was 10 days, and now apparently you can get it, but if you get it, you might not never even get sick, and you can still pass it on. Which, my God, you want to talk about something to make people paranoid? I could have it and not have symptoms, right?
Exactly.
And then it was, and then there's like national stuff going on where it's like, you have to wear a mask, or you don't have to wear a mask, but a bandana won't work, but an N95 mask will work, and so this different, like the lack of information tends to be very destabilizing for people. People really like when you tell them like, do this and you'll be safe. When it's like, if you do this, you kind of might be safe. We're not really sure. It's better than nothing. People don't like that, and that creates a lot of anxiety for them. So you've got that kind of information going on. Then you've got like the 24-hour news coverage, right? And the constant posting on Facebook and Instagram and and TikTok and all everybody's doing is talking about this. Well, here's something that people probably don't realize is, even though social media feels kind of new, really it's been around for 15, 16 years now. I mean, Facebook really got going in 2002, 2003. I know right when I was entering college. And so, at this point, we've got 15, 16 years of psychological research on what the effects of social media and the effects of news media are on people. And even, news media really changed after 9/11 in terms of, kind of the format and how intense it is and how everything's an emergency. And what we know is that people who sit down and watch MSNBC, watch Fox News, watch CNN all day are dramatically more stressed out. Ironically, they end up being less informed in a lot of ways. Same thing with social media. We know that the more time you spend on Facebook every day, the more depressed you're going to be and the more anxious you're going to be, and especially during things like this. And you've probably had these moments where, somebody says something stupid on Facebook and you make a snarky comment back or something like that. And then all of a sudden, you're all pissed off and I got to take the dog on a walk, and it's like that energy wouldn't even have been in your world before if you just hadn't even looked at it. So we've got first our, lack of information and people feeling like they're getting different stories. They don't know how to stay safe. Then you've got this influx of too much information, which is being driven by news companies and social media companies wanting to make as much money as possible. And then you've got this third piece, right, which is fake information, which some of it is coming, put disinfectant into your body. That'll cure it, or it's causing it causes less deaths than the flu, which and it's the same as the flu, so why does it even matter? And I know a guy who's 101 who got it and he was fine, and these kind of this fake information or these half-truths that are then affecting people's ability to they're either getting angry at it or they're believing it, which is putting them into either conflict with other people because then they're arguing with them about it. I've even seen things on Facebook about this is all a conspiracy by Bill Gates to get microchips in everybody, and wild stuff that so all of this. So what you do is now you look at these three things, the lack of information, too much information, and the fake information. You combine it and throw it together and then throw it in people's faces. Well, and when people are in a panic and they're stuck at their house, it's like it's almost like a Twilight Zone episode where it's like, or it's like 1984 where these transmissions of stuff is just being beamed into people and they've got nothing better to do. So they're absorbing it all day. And, we absorb that. And what we don't know yet is what is the effect of absorbing all of this over multiple weeks and time. And are we going to see traumatic responses? Are we going to see revolt? Where we see people go, I don't care anymore. I'm not social distancing anymore. This is stupid. I've had enough of this, which we're seeing a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Did any piece of that stand out to you as interesting?
Well, all of it is super interesting to me, but I really like that you're basically of all of this Molotov cocktail that's basically being chucked into our home day in and day out. You're kind of really recommending at this point, like an hour of news a day?
1 hour. Much? Yeah, and that recommendation comes from the APA and a few other sources as well, that, what we know isn't good is trying to stay with the up-to-minute. I've had clients who are literally keeping track of the death rate every day, which is horrible and depressing and not something you should be doing. So what I would recommend is in the morning or at night for 1 hour, go on social media, go on CNN, get an update. What we know from research, one of the cool things that's happened is out of China, there's actually been a couple of really great, they've done rapid review journal articles because they want to get some psychological information out. So one study actually found that if you are focusing more on local news than you are national news, you're actually going to be a lot less stressed out, because they find that the local news it's more relevant for most people, obviously to your daily life, and it gives you a greater sense of internal control with what's going on. They didn't say this in the research study. This is, my Dr. Kipp's add-on, I'll just say. It's also going to be way less sensationalized.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I mean, for me personally, I just feel like the national news is just so depressing and there's so much doom and gloom that I'm super thankful to have good old TV6, because I'll check the TV6 app once a day, and I've pretty much stayed off of Facebook. I had given it up for Lent, and I added it back for about 10 minutes, and it was just bumming me out. I was just getting you were saying, you see a post and it makes you frustrated, and you're just bringing so much negative energy into your world that I'm just like, I'm better off without it. And I can feel like mentally, I just feel in a way better place without like that constant like barrage coming in.
Yeah. So, so, 1 hour a week or 1 hour a day is really where I'm recommending. Keep it local. Carl Bonac is not, going after Trump or, he's just probably interested in giving you what the news is and the weather and all that, so.
Right. For sure.
It is what it is. So, so that's, that's a big recommendation. Other things that a lot of people have been asking me about is like, how do you talk to your kids about coronavirus? Because, a lot of parents are really struggling with both the managing it and then how do I actually tell my kids? So the first thing that I've been saying to everybody is you have to accept that you're not going to be a perfect parent during this situation, because the expectation that you're going to be this amazing Instagram mom who's going to put together a full day of school and do your full work day for your kids every day is not realistic. And I can tell you, as a person who I live with a 5th grade teacher, that she's also not able to put a full day to school. And she does this all day, every day. And she's one of the best teachers at her school, right? And you just can't. So, we have to accept that some plates are going to fall during this time. And that if you're competing against every other mom, or you have this vision, I'm like letting my kids fall apart, or I'm choosing my work, recognize first, you're not on your own on this. Every school in America is probably going to have to teach a good part of this year, the end of this year, at the beginning of next year.
Sure.
That's what's going to happen. You can't, I know most, like, I don't know about the MEEP test in Michigan, but we have the STAR test in Texas. Like the STAR tests were all canceled.
Okay.
And, they're not just going to let the kids not do that information before they go on to the next year.
Sure.
So accept first that, this is going to be basically a elongated summer vacation, that your kids are going to fall behind, that they're going to get a little lazier, that they're going to play more video games, that they're going to watch more movies, that they're going to be bumming around, and that's okay. And that's long term, that's not going to like make or break their childhood. Okay. So let that go. The second thing is, for talking to kids about it, is I think it's, of course, important to be honest about like, hey, this is like a sickness, that's going around, and it's really important to stay inside. We're helping people, we're helping old people. But the big thing is emphasizing the things that stay the same for kids. The fact that kids are loved, that they're cared for, that they're like, they every day, like mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad, whoever, are going to be there for them no matter what, and they care about them. Like emphasizing those important things every day, we know has a huge impact on children's resiliency, because kids can become either more like damaged and traumatized from big national events like this, or they become more resilient and stronger and more flexible. And one of the key factors that makes that happen is if they have that stability that they feel like they can lean on. So really emphasizing to your kids that you care about them, that nothing's going to change, that you have a little routine or a little tradition that you do with them every night during pandemic time, whether it be reading a book or watching a movie or watching an episode of a show or something, that every night you got something going on with them. And then take the pressure off yourself that, you probably heard this in one way or not, another's got it, everyone's like, we're not working from home. We're in a crisis trying to work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's really how you have to think about this, and some people I've heard, it's like, can I even am I allowed to take a sick day if I'm at home? Yeah, you are. You're absolutely allowed to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Even if it's a mental health sick day, if anything, this is the time you would need a mental health day more than ever.
Right.
And just because you're doing your work in your pajamas doesn't mean it's not work, or it doesn't mean it's more difficult, not more challenging. So, take the pressure off yourself, people. It's really okay, and careful of what you're absorbing, even from other parents and others, what the teachers are expecting. And, careful where other people's anxiety might be influencing you.
I think these are all really great tips, and I hope that other people find them as valuable as I have, just kind of even just talking about it, depending on, obviously I don't have kids, but just hearing from someone like yourself, who has experience in these types of things, just kind of putting it out there for people, it helps a lot. And I think people need to hear it, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that's really why I wanted you to come on the podcast, besides just sharing your story, but to really give some tips to people during a time when, like you said, they really probably need them most.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those out there, you know, who are really struggling too, you know, almost everybody in America, every counselor or psychologist in America is doing some kind of online counseling. A lot of states have lifted their restrictions on, like, you know, can you meet over Google, you know, Hangouts and stuff, and you can now in most states. So if you're really struggling, you know, get on site. There's a great website called Psychology Today where you can look for a therapist. Almost every county in America has at least one therapist. You know, so get on there and find somebody, and chances are you can have just a nice conversation and your insurance will cover it. You know, so please do that if you need some support. Same thing if you need, you know, you need some kind of psychiatric medication or anything. There's no reason you can't meet with a psychiatrist or meet with a medical doctor and you feel like you need that extra boost or support, because, you know, our bodies really are being affected by sitting around a lot more and not being outdoors and not walking around, not interacting. So, you know, the lack of serotonin in your body is not your fault.
Right.
It's not a weakness. It's not something you did wrong, you know. It's just a result of, you know, big part of it's just vitamin D, you know. So,
yeah.
So you know, don't be afraid of things like that. They can be incredibly helpful during a crisis like this. So
that's an awesome piece of advice to share. So I appreciate you sharing that website that people can go to if they really need some help or to talk to somebody. Is there anything else that we haven't really kind of hit on that you'd want to mention or maybe bring up? I mean, we hit all of the points that I really wanted to kind of talk about. So, I mean, if there's anything else you want to put out there, feel free.
yeah, you know, the one other thing I'll just throw out there that I think it's really important for people to remember too is like the financial piece. For those who don't know, I know we're getting bombarded with a lot of, you know, information. It's like some people have gotten stimulus checks, some people had them directly deposited, some people are waiting for them to come in the mail. That there's a lot of really great services out there that I think people aren't totally aware of. So if you are struggling financially, one is, of course, like if you have student loans, the public interest loan forgiveness is, you know, even if you're not paying, nobody has to pay student loans at least through Fed loan for the next 6 months, which is great. And if you're doing public loan forgiveness, meaning you work for like the state, you actually get credit for every month, even though you're not paying. So it counts toward your 120 payments you need. So, you know, please take advantage of that for folks who need it. In addition to that, people don't always know with their student loans that they actually get 3 years of deferment regardless of this.
Wow. Okay.
So if you're ever like, oh man, my car broke down and I have a $1,200 payment or a $1,300, I got a $2,000, I got to put a new transmission in or something like that, you can actually take that month off from your student loans and you get 36 months of that.
Wow. Okay,
so
that's it. That is good info.
Yeah, so don't feel like at the end of the 6 months that you're all of a sudden like, oh crap, now I got to pay my student loans again and my business hasn't started back up, or, you know, so you have lots of time on that. And most major businesses too are also, if you like for example, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, or Sprint, now Sprint and T-Mobile have merged. They're all offering like payment reductions or payment plans where you don't have to pay everything right away up front. And most major places, even mortgage companies, are starting to do that.
Yeah.
So just don't be shocked if you owe a bill and you're freaking out because your job has been deemed non-essential or something like that. There's a lot of really great resources out there, and so please explore those. In addition, to the unemployment, which a lot of people have been doing, or I know those small business loans have been a little bit of a mess, but please look into things, because I think it's really easy during this time of panic and misinformation to miss some things that are really helpful. So just do your research on what's available right now. So that's the only other thing I can think of, Scott.
Okay. Well, then I'll wrap it up here with the question that I ask everybody at the end of the podcast, and that's, how do you like your pasty?
Okay, so I thought a lot about this, right? Has anybody ever said that they prefer a pasty pie?
A pasty pie? No, I haven't heard that.
So here's cool thing. Have you ever heard the fact about pasties that like the reason that they're shaped the way they are is because like the miners had to take them down in the mines?
Yeah, with the crust, so you didn't have to get with your dirty hands.
So that's actually not true. And I'll tell you why that's not true. Because I went to England, and I was in London, England, and they sell Cornish pasties.
Right, because of Cornwall. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like they sell like like one of the main bus terminals or train terminals in London. They like right in the center. There's a pasty shop, and
Okay.
Cornwall, England isn't this super mining place or anything like that. So they've been making, but originally it comes from like a meat pie.
Okay.
And they wanted to make the meat pie more so you could transit it, so you could carry it. And that's where a pasty actually comes from. So when I grew up, my great grandmother would make pasties, but she would make pasty pie, like a traditional meat pie. Now, we all know that you're a complete savage and barely a human if you like rutabaga in your pasty, so let's just start there.
Well, I tend to disagree. I like rutabaga in my pasty, so maybe I'm a savage, but I'm very traditional. I like it in there.
It's a root and a vegetable that does not belong in a. No, I'm just kidding. But
you're a true looper if you call it a rutabaga instead of a rutabaga.
Rutabaga, yeah. And also,
rutabaga.
Even saying rutabaga. I'm trying to think how I say it. I think I say rutabaga. Anyway, so I like that. But since my great grandmother passed away, we haven't done pasty pies. So I like a thick crust.
Okay.
I like a crunchy crust, with some flake on it. Traditional pasty. I don't like the touristy kind of pasty. You go across the bridge and it's like, get a pizza pasty.
Yeah.
That's blasphemy, obviously.
Are you a ketchup guy?
I'm like, of course, I'm a ketchup. Okay. I mean, ketchup is the lifeblood of the pasty. Everybody knows that. So yeah, I'm a lot of ketchup guy. Like I'm also a big fan of, you don't finish the pasty, but you covered it in ketchup already. Mm-hmm. Then you put it in the refrigerator, take it out. The ketchup and the pasty is cold.
Whoa, okay. All right.
So I'm a big fan of like the next day, like next day pizza, the next day pasty. I'm a really big fan of that as well. So
do you ever order them like online and get them shipped down to you down there?
You can. In North Dakota, they had them. They actually had pasty oven pasties in North Dakota, which I remember, which was awesome. You'd go to Super One. They had a Super One in Grand.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
And you could actually get them, which is nice. But I haven't had them down here, but they have similar. Like you have to be creative in how you look for them. So you can get like a meat pie kind of thing down here, but it's not the same. Plus, if I'm going to eat meat down in Texas, it's probably going to be brisket.
Yeah. Fair enough. So. Well, Kipp, I have to thank you again for taking the time to sit down and chat with me. Definitely kind of something out of my comfort zone, and I learned a lot of new stuff. And like I said, I think this is going to be really helpful for people. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun.